Just like that. Now you're feeling terrified.
I like it.
Happening. Yeah. Awesome. Hi, AJ. So how's it going?
Hi.
Hi. Like we pretend like we haven't just talked for 10 minutes.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is going to be so weird because we know each other so well that, it's like that transition into like me pretending like I don't know you the segue doesn't work. So I'm just going to get into doing the intro and then we'll get into the questions.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So you, AJ Hawley.
Yes.
Hawley, not Holley. You're a passionate change agent who focuses on reinventing stale business processes, empowering professional individuals and teams, challenging the status quo, and never accepting because we've always done it this way. Motivated by driving engagement between organizations and their consumers, employees, teams, and their team members, or simply individuals, you use tools such as Microsoft Dynamics 365, Microsoft Azure DevOps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Requirements. Okay, I'm trying to get all this right. Requirements, elicitation, and management. Gherkin, like a little pickle.
No, I don't use pickles. It's but yes, occasionally if the situation calls for it, people feel snacky during meetings. Sure.
Yeah, if you're Canadian Caesar, American.
Bloody Mary, yeah.
You might have to throw a Gherkin in there. Okay. Agile development, Scrum, iteration management to help organizations save time and money. And so even though you're one of my very best friends, I have no idea what you do. So that's what we're here to talk about today, about how to automate and save time and save money. Right? So that's, as you know, because our circle of crazy friends encouraged me to try and create this podcast to talk about, imposter syndrome and then just interview people about their career journey because, where we've ended up now is far different than when we started out. So it's just kind of funny. As I said, you're one of my very best friends. And so to now talk to you about all of this kind of stuff is kind of neat because we don't talk about this stuff most of the time. It's our career journey, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun. So,
well, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited to, chat with you about nerdy stuff. So I can nerd out about this literally all day. So you said, we only have an hour and I'm like, man, that's a lot to pack into 60 minutes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you and I can talk. We never have a problem with that.
True.
Okay. So tell me, the reason why I know you, and our friend Amy is not on the call today because usually she chimes in, is because we have met only virtually, really through project management, business analyst, that whole sort of world of speaking and things like that. So, so let me just back up and ask you, how did you get involved in your career? Like, how did you get started?
Yeah, I think it's mostly by accident, to be honest. And it's one of those things where I started out in college and had like 7 different majors, throughout the time that I was there. And I just kind of bounced around to a whole bunch of different things because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it was one of those things where I started out and I finally landed on the thing that I originally started out with, which was software development. And then moved into a software developer role. So I was coding all day and I'm like, I'm really not passionate about this. I don't like doing this aspect of it. I really like asking people questions and figuring out why I'm doing some of this stuff, because a lot of the things that I was doing code wise, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Or I know that I'm going to do this, but then they said, well, can you add this? And can you add this? And I was finally like, well, let me move to the business analyst side of it, and did that for a while because I like the questions. I like asking somebody, well, is this what you want? Why do you want it this way? What's the process for this? Figuring out all of those behind the scene questions, because frankly, I hated the busy work. If I just created something, someone's like, well, now you have to, delete that and create something else, or, whatever the process was. And so I just felt like there was a lot of times where I wasn't doing something that was of value. I wasn't delivering any value. And so then moved into Dynamics 365, and I had a friend of mine, she's like, hey, we're hiring, we're looking for this, and you seem to have a lot of the same skills. And it was someone that I had worked with before. And that's kind of where I got started in the dynamic space and have loved it really ever since. So it's evolved dramatically since I think I've been in 8 years now. In the 8 years that I've been there, Microsoft has just changed the entire platform itself. So before it was just one thing about, managing a CRM and customer relationship management, and so then now it's so much more than that. Now it includes automation, and it includes so many other things that just weren't in the scope of what we did before.
Do you want to comment on Steve? Steve's got a comment there. Were you naturally iterative, but no value in initial deliveries?
Naturally iterative, I think by accident. Yeah, so it was one of those things where I tried this didn't really work. Well, let me try something else. So I failed very fast, is what you would call that in the Agile space. But a lot of the things that we were doing, at the time, like it was an Agile environment, but we just had people that weren't necessarily sure of what they wanted. And we were moving so fast code wise that when they first saw it, they said, well, this isn't what I want. So they were able to come back, and which I guess is really part of the process. But that, for me, frustrates me. Rework always frustrates me.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I just remember, because I've worked in the digital landscape for a very long time and on the marketing side of things. And, I think most people that aren't in the internet technology side of things think, well, it's just really easy. It's just just change the web. Like, how hard is it? It's not as if you're having to change something that's already gone to print or, anything like that. So like, how hard is it? And you're like, do you have any idea that little thing that you've asked me to change is now going to have this, cascading effect where other things, or
Sure.
I've got like 18,000 other people that are asking me to make this one small change. So
Yeah.
I know that world is not, I just know from the, having worked with people that were in IT, that the expectations from the IT people are, they're just little worker bees that are just sitting there waiting for you to tell them, please just make this is the one, just one little change to please. So
Yeah, I think to go back to an old commercial, that everyone assumes that IT guys are the Maytag repairman. They're just sitting there with their leg up and kicking back. Yeah, right. Just taking a nap, etc. And, a lot of times you're right. You're managing multiple different things and servicing multiple different teams at the same time.
And so you just got to the place where you were like, instead of being at the end of the, at the end of the line, let's start at the beginning to make sure that we're not screwing things up through the process, because there's no point making this change if the first thing, if the goals and the strategies are not aligned, then why are we even making that change in the first place? Huh?
Yeah, and I found myself in a cool spot where I could be, since I spoke both languages, I was able to talk to the tech team and say, well, here's what they really want, or go back with a technical problem that they had. It's like, well, if we do this has that cascading effect, like you mentioned, and it's going to break 4 or 5 different things downstream if we decide to do this. So have that conversation in a way that wasn't technical to the business team. So it did afford me a lot of leeway that way, where I could play that middle person very well and translate some of those requirements.
Well, just having known you for the time that I've known you, you certainly just don't you like to ask why a lot. Like a lot of times, like, well, what for what purpose is that? Like, it's like, which is so interesting, that challenging sort of the status quo. You just are not like, oh, you're not kind of the person who just goes, okay. You're like, well, why? Well, why would one want to do that? Well, why? To really get those people thinking. So is that what drives you, or are you just always naturally that in a gentle way, you're a challenger, but you are a challenger?
Yeah, I think. No, that's true. I think, I'm curious by nature. So I want to figure out what caused something, what was the root cause. I'm always doing kind of that root cause analysis, which is a big tool set for business analysts. I'm always doing that, but with anything, and I think I put one time I was a petulant 2-year-old, as an adult. And I feel like that's all the time. Like, well, why, and I'm just naturally curious about what made someone make this decision and what made them decide to do this. And that's very interesting, because you figure out really where people's minds go and what is important to them and what's not important to them. So just asking those kind of follow-up questions and secondary questions, I think allows you to get into someone's shoes or into their mindset a little bit more when they are making, decisions, or when they are experiencing pretty much anything. So to me, it's just very interesting as a human to figure out, well, why? This is what Leslie did in this case, and this is why she felt this way, and that's so interesting. And then you can use that to follow up on, later when you are talking and it's been 6 months and you're like, you see now something that it's like, well, this is different than what I knew about you from 6 months ago. So are you changing? Is the situation changing? And so I just find it really informative.
That's not getting into my personal life, AJ. No, I'm kidding. And so Steve says that you're a button pusher. No, a button pusher. Wanted to know, or just saying that you're a button usher. I know he wanted to say pusher. So just busting your chops, Steve.
Yeah, I think that's okay, though. I think that those people it's not always been a smooth ride career-wise. So going in and I know that I've frustrated management and frustrated leaders, but at the same time, if I feel like I understand why I'm doing something and why I'm pushing other business people, for this, I can get behind someone's idea, right? So if they say, well, we're doing this because we're trying to increase metrics here or increase sales here, or we have no insight into this aspect, great. Now I have the reason why I can help facilitate that idea and push it downstream. And if it's because I told you to, that never flies with me. I'm just like, okay.
It's not the best answer either. I know he worked in an agency. One of the clients that I was working with, he is like this conduit between agencies and the clients, because what happens typically with a lot of agencies is they're yes men. They're like, okay, the client wants this done, let's do it, without sort of thinking, well, why? Like, for what purpose are we doing this? So I think asking those questions why, it may piss people off, but it also, at the end of the day, is a good question, because often we do because because you said so, okay. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. So I would agree with you. So there was a few questions that I had about. So I mentioned to you this morning before we got on this call that I was listening to a podcast about automation and the fears. The interesting thing, and this is like a really hot topic, I think, in sort of the zeitgeist, if you will, about how we're seeing in stores, the automation in some ways are taking away, I guess, unskilled workers is the best way to describe them, but people who are either receptionists or at the grocery store, there's automated, machines and things like that. So people are afraid of automation is going to take over those jobs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think unskilled workers is it's not the accurate term, because I feel like if it's unskilled, then literally anybody could just walk in and do it immediately, right?
Yeah,
so
not the word.
Yeah, every job is skilled to some nature, because you have to train them on, well, this job here is going to be different. So it doesn't matter if you are a grocery store, clerk. At that point, if you go to grocery store A to grocery store B, yeah, it's going to be different because they do it different, et cetera. So,
right.
Yeah, I think it is the number one concern.
Sorry, Amy, to stop. Go ahead.
So it is the number one concern about people. They're like, well, you're automating me out of a job. You're taking me out of a job. And, I feel like it's one of those things. So can we talk about crappy jobs for a minute?
Yeah, let's talk about crappy jobs.
Crappy jobs for a minute. So in 1900, Chicago had, it was 83,000 horses that they used in just everyday life. So to use to, pull things, to push, that was their mode of transportation, etc. So guess what horses do? Well, they do their business. So when they do their business, they produced at that time 1,600 tons of manure a day. So they had jobs that were called the manure mongers, right? So those are pretty crappy jobs. And, it's one of those things where everyone was concerned about, it caused its own issues there because of pestilence and diseases and all this other stuff that was, part of the trouble there. They don't know what to do with it, et cetera. But it was one of those things where people were concerned about, well, if we bring in cars, it's going to change the way that we live. It's going to change everything. We're not going to have as many jobs because we don't need like you mentioned earlier, the cascading things. So, horses, now you had to have farriers and you had to have all these different jobs that were surrounding that industry that changed. Well, that's kind of where we are now, and I think that automation allows us to automate repetitive processes and things that are there that are, let's say, not very complex and repetitive. So the way that I always address it is, if you are an office worker and you can listen to a podcast while you do your job, that's probably a job that can't be automated, right? So then that frees you up to actually use your creative thinking skills and all the things that make you human to focus on that aspect of a job. So it's not that, those jobs are necessarily useless jobs or anything like that. It's that we can actually take those and focus on the things that are around you as a human and make a fulfilling job that is taking that transactional part out of it and then making it something that is, I think, worthwhile for you. So now you get to bring your own personality, your own humanity into whatever job it is that you're doing.
Yeah, and well, as Steve mentioned, he's automating Is Steve doing this too, or is it you automating the low value things so you can focus on the higher value activities, which is
and I think if we looked at appliances, so the dishwasher is one, the washing machine is another. Those are things that free you up, so that way you're not spending all of your time to do, what I would consider menial tasks, right? So before you would have to wash it and wring it and hang it, and there was so much that went into that. So now you have the free time to do whatever it is that you want to do. If it's, blow through your Netflix queue or whatever, then that's what it is. But you now have free time to focus on learning something different and doing something different. And I think that's where automation is really kind of revolutionizing how we do work day to day. So we can take those things, shove those off to another application, have a bot do that job, come back with the data that were there. And then now we can manage things by exception versus managing things that are, all the nitty gritty things detail wise.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the thing that I seem to have seen in my life are those jobs that are repetitive, the jobs that are the tasks that you don't need to put a lot of effort into it. Those people, from what I've seen, most of them are not usually that happy in their job. There's not a purpose, a fulfillment at the end of the day, that they've done something meaningful in a way. So I think, yeah. Go ahead.
That's definitely true, where there's a lot of dissatisfaction in jobs just because of that. So there have been studies that have said that 70% of people are unhappy with the job that they're doing. And so the way that I've seen it also described is that, in a rowboat of 10 people, there are 5 people that are just coasting along, 3 people that are rowing it, and then 2 people that are actively trying to sink it. So you have that mentality going into.
I'd be the one that they call it lily dip. Like when you go whitewater rafting, they're like, "Are you a lily dipper?" I'd be one of those. I'd be sitting there. Yeah. Oh no, I'm working hard. I'm working really hard, but meanwhile, I'm not digging it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and the way that I see that is, if you have a paddle and your paddle has these big holes in it, it looks like Swiss cheese, and you're paddling along. Well, if you're not driving any momentum, you're producing effort with no value, right? And I feel like that's where we have the opportunity on the automation side to say, how can I rethink your job so that way you come in and you are excited about doing it? You can see your measured deliverable value from day to day.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there goes Steve bringing in joke about, which is when we play games night, in case other people don't have the context of where joke boat sort of comes into the play, which is bump. So in your role, and we were talking about this because I'm still just trying to wrap my head around the whole, and you've been doing this Microsoft Dynamics stuff for, you said 8 years, and yet you're trying to introduce me to this stuff, and it's the usability I find of just getting involved in it from the baby steps is not user friendly, nor are a lot of sites, though, quite frankly. I know, even though I do LinkedIn, and it's easy for me because I use LinkedIn all the time, it's not user friendly for other people. So Microsoft what's it called? 365?
Yeah, so there's a couple different areas, right? Okay. So there's the like Microsoft 365. So that's going to be your office and operating system. You're going to have Dynamics 365, which is more like a business application, where you would have that when you might have a sales area, a marketing area, a customer service area, and then even finance and operations, right? So on your accounting side, how you maintain inventory and invoice people, et cetera. And then you have what they call the Power Platform, which is another set of tools that you can use to build your own either apps from scratch. You can use data model driven apps. So that way they are designated to like the sales or marketing or customer service side. And then you can also do things like automation. You can do business intelligence, and then even do virtual agents. So have your own like chatbots and things like that, or logic kind of applications or logic bots that run things for you.
Cool. Well, it sounds very
So,
complicated.
so it sounds complicated, and it can be, but at the same time, it's a lot of it is pre-built. So you just get to out of the box, you get all this functionality, and then where someone like you would come in to configure it for your organization. So you would be on the marketing side of it, right? And so it might be worthwhile for you to have what the sales navigator tool, which will allow you to pull information out of LinkedIn to find either new business or new opportunities that you would pull in. Then you can take those, use those as a lead. So you might have 50,000 CEOs that are on your list of leads, right? Well, then as you start figuring out who they are, their interests, their levels, you can turn those into opportunities and then use all of these different tools behind the scenes that just allow you to evaluate that. So you might have a different process than somebody else that does something similar. And then now you can create your own process for how you evaluate that, how you transfer those leads into business opportunities, and then ultimately how you make money. So you can see all the insights in there. So that would be something like that I would be setting up for someone like you. And then you might have on the customer service side a call center or operation center that you would come in. So maybe even claims processing. I've done several of those for insurance companies. And so then you have a claim come in. How do you adjudicate that claim? How do you figure out, well, who is this? What do they need? What's the product that they enrolled in, et cetera, right? So just ways to take all of that information, and then you can use a collection of these tools to simplify all the jobs. So that way you aren't reading every single email, figuring out what that email says. You can use these tools to scan through the email, route it to the right person, and then now that person is just picking it up and they go, oh, I know that this is a car insurance claim, and it's auto insurance. That's going to be the policy, and it was a collision. So I know all those things. Now I'm starting from that standpoint versus having to start from scratch.
So obviously, so like you, like some of our other friends that are working sort of like the project management business analyst, it's like simplifying complex, right? Like it's just taking everything, distilling it down and going, okay, you need to get from point A to point Z. You just figure out how to get people and doing it in an automated process. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and the truth is there's so much that can be automated. So you can have things that are very simplistic, like setting up invoices, right? So you have invoices for clients that you've got at the end of the month, and you know how many either hours you spent or maybe it's job based. So then you could say, well, I did this many jobs. You could go through manually in Excel and put those in there, and then now take all that data and put it into like a Word document, and then turn that into a PDF and then send it out, right? Email. Or you could click a button to have that send out automatically. And then now you don't have to do that because you just saved 4 hours of your time doing nothing. You just click the button, and because you already had the data there, it's thinking for you, right?
Yeah. And that's the way I started out when I had, it was time or money in the beginning when I started out my business. It was definitely the Excel spreadsheet and the Word document and the whole 9 yards. And then I eventually got, a software that helps me do that for that same reason. Right. And I was a little like, I don't like spending. I hate spending money. But I know at the same time, the time that it saves, it's like I can spend more money working with clients if I'm not spending it creating the invoices and so forth. So for sure.
I actually automated that process for a family member and for their work, and showed it's like, here's what you can do. And it took 8 hours of their day and automated it into 10 minutes. And so that's what it took. So all of their work for 8 hours was just consolidated into 10 minutes. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I've yet to do it for myself. So I'm still the one doing spreadsheets, and it's like cobbler's kids have the worst shoes kind of a situation. But
Yeah.
there's a job that won't be automated. Cobblers. Cobblers. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can find one nowadays, that's a whole other story, right? But yeah, there are, and it's interesting because that podcast that I was listening to, I can't remember who, it was the Rich Roll. Anyway, he was interviewing Kevin Roos, I guess, and he was sort of saying, like, how tethered are we to these devices? I mean, a lot of people are afraid of automation, and yet how many of us, I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but I know I've taught my students something like most of us would rather lose our sense of smell and taste than we would to lose our cell phones. Or the amount, and they were even talking about the amount, like when your cell phone gives you the data of how much time do you spend on your phone? How panicked do we feel when we leave our phone behind? And yet, so this is the future, like the expectation of these little devices, which cost as much as a laptop, to be able to do the functionality and like the expectation. We just it's no longer that the phone works for, like, we're working on I don't know how, I'm not saying that right though, but like we now depend upon our phones, whereas before it was a luxury, and now for like it's pretty much an essential for most people now.
Sure. Yeah, but if you think about all the different things that a phone does, so when cell phones were first created, they were created as cell phones. So now it was a landline that you have walking wherever you're going. You're taking that concept, and then now you're saying literally today you can do everything a computer does in your pocket, right? So the difference is, we're going to be on it more because we are doing a lot more with it. It connects us to individuals. It's our social outlet, and sometimes even connection points, especially during pandemics and things like that, where we're heavily using devices to connect, right? It can automate schedules. You can do so much more that we would have had 8 or 10 different devices that we're collectively doing. So I think that we do spend a lot of time on our phone, and there's a whole psychology around how much addiction versus how much time we're actually spending in productivity. Are we just kind of doom scrolling through our feeds and just doing that until 4 o'clock in the morning? And there's algorithms that are there to help make it addictive and to get that serotonin burst just for a second, But at the same time, we can do a lot more other things where we couldn't necessarily do that before. So
that's the perfect metaphor, probably, for what you do, really. To think about it from that perspective. One of the slides that I show my students is that everything that we used to have, from a DVD player to a clock to, like a watch to, all of these things are all now, camera, everything, all used to be separate devices that are now all rolled into one device. And that's kind of what you kind of are doing, right? All these like other things that could have been sort of like out in the ether, or not ether, like out in, doing other things and consolidating it down into distilling it into, like, is that a good metaphor?
Kind of. I think what the easiest case scenario is, let's say we have somebody who is working in an operations center, and so they're taking phone calls, etc. Now, one of the things that I've had to do in multiple operation centers like that is to consolidate applications. So they have application A that only does the billing and so on. They have application B that is their accounting, etc. So those two systems don't talk. They have to go in and look up a client that they have in system C, but they document that in system D, right? And so then you have 4 different systems that they have to copy paste from A to B to C to talk, because some director somewhere needs to have a consolidated report that looks and they can make business decisions on, right? So then figuring out how do you make all those systems talk to each other is one of the things that I enjoy doing, because then you see people that are, on the front lines of the operations center, and they're copying things into Notepad and then pasting them, and you're not really getting data from that interaction. So the companies aren't really going in and getting meaningful data out of it. So then you have somebody that's kind of wasting their time collecting all this information that you can't really even parse through, right? So someone goes in and you have interaction with whomever. Let's say we'll say your cell phone carrier, right? So that you talk to somebody, they literally write down everything that you're saying, and then now you have a whole wall of text that you have to parse through. And then I had a recent experience where I was working, or my phone wasn't working, I wasn't making calls. So I went into my carrier's site. I went to their chatbot because it makes you do that first, right? To start the communication. And then it asked me a question. Have you tried this? Yes, I have. Have you tried this? Yes, I have. Have you tried this? No, I haven't. So then now I went through that step. It gave me the instructions to do that step. And then that solved my issue. So in 4 chats, I was able to resolve the issue that I had to begin with without ever having talking to a human. And so that saves obviously the company money. It saves the individual from going through the same repetitive processes, and they can now focus on something that was like higher. And so if it was something super complex that was not as easy as mine was, for instance.
Yeah. So and I think the one thing that I've learned, because I interviewed a girl that I went to high school with a few weeks ago, and she's into that whole customer service thing, having worked at one of our major telecom communication companies, is like the frustration. And now I'm even more mindful of it, that frustration of like, okay, so I'm much more comfortable looking at a bot first, going to the online chat, which, as you mentioned, both saves the company time and money. And it gets frustrating when then you have to leave the online world to get back on the phone, to push the button, to like that disconnect. And we're not there yet insofar as customer service, but it's fun. It's funny that is that I noticed that I would rather download an app to order food than to pick up the phone call. And I'm like, well, where's the psychology in that I'm just like, I just can't talk to people, which like, it's just so crazy because, as you know, I love to talk. But just like, I don't want to order a pizza. Like anyway, that's a whole other sort of thing, but there's a psychology there that I don't get, but I get.
No. And to be honest, there's demographics that support all of that. So, and data that supports all of that based on demographics. And the previous client that I was working with, they were hearing device manufacturers and resellers. And so that's exactly, so the older demographic, they said, I want to speak to a human. I want to know that Leslie took care of me and this was the issue, regardless of how complex or simple the issue was. And then, you're spending 30 minutes on the phone with someone that, obviously if you're doing that every day, you can only take 16 phone calls, right? So that's an expense right there, right? But at the same time, some of it is, in that community, you are dealing with older folks that just want to talk to somebody, right? So I have somebody on the phone and I want that human interaction. I think in what you're describing is more of a transactional communication, right? So I don't want anything from you specifically. I want you to give me a pizza in the next 30 minutes or else,
there'll be
Hanger is going to take over. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, but it's one of those things where in transactional situations like that, I don't want to speak to anybody. I just want this to take care of itself, and that's it. I don't want to figure out where my item is being shipped from or to, or where. I just want to know updates on that on a regular basis. I don't want to have to call you to figure that out, right? But there's other times when you have complex issues that just don't describe it. So, I received something and it's broken, and I need to communicate to you why or how it's not working, et cetera. Those kind of things are there, and especially with like electronics. You find that, you ever get something and then it's not working and you go through all the things in the manual, and then I want to talk to somebody here because I've already gone through the first 8 steps and I don't want someone else to go through all those, again with me.
Yeah. So I guess it's so nuanced that we're certainly not there yet insofar as letting AI completely take over. Because we still definitely need to talk with people about the complexity things, the things that aren't necessarily, as you said, like transactional. It's an aha for me, actually, because you're right. When it's transactional and I don't want to talk to anybody, just give me what I want when I want it. Yeah. But when it's nuanced and when it's something that I'm like, well, I have to explain, I don't really want to get into the weeds of explaining, but I know I have to in order for you to understand the context of my problem, then I have to get on the horn with somebody. And sometimes it's exasperating, but yeah. And then you're right. And sometimes it's demographics, because as I see my mom trying to navigate through things, like, where's the button on I was like, oh, please just call customer service. I don't want to help you. Is finding that, and my mom keeps saying, you just wait till you get old and you can't, because technology is certainly going to be where you and I are going to be like, I don't know how to get rid of the flashing 12 on our VCR. We're going to be those people at one point too, with technology.
And it'll be totally different, but I think the good news is that we'll have VR, so that'll be great. And at least, VR and even augmented reality, which is something that is kind of on that front horizon of, you can get some of the apps on your phone. To be honest, we were looking at doing some landscaping. So that's a great way of using, AI and technology. I wanted to do some landscaping, and I can vision what I want where. My wife is not that way. She needs to see it. She's a very visual person. So we were able to use augmented reality to say, here's what it would look like in this space, in our house, in front of our yard. And she's like, oh, okay, this makes sense, And so that we were able to use technology to solve something else that would have been like, oh, just trust me, it'll look great when, we are finished.
Yeah. Well, I did the same thing. During the pandemic, I bought glasses. That's exactly how I bought my glasses, was with one of those, tools that said, okay, so do these look cute, or do these fit me, or,
Sure.
And so I was able, without, during a pandemic, not having to go to the, what is it called? The optometrist or whatever, like, to get to the eyeglass store to get glasses for that same thing. And so those are coming, and they're really useful. And they're even in the gamification. I mean, Pokemon, right? When that first came out, that was like all into, so it's been around for quite a while, but it hasn't just sort of been adopted. I guess the technology is still pretty new, but it's been around for a while.
Yeah, I think in some cases it's the technology is proving that a problem exists, and you're trying to figure out the problem after it's already created. But I think as we move forward and we see certain, like I've seen dashboard systems where they actually show augmented reality as you're driving, right? So now you can see, well, this is highlighting something that I'm trying to find, et cetera. So I can see where information like that, almost like a HUD display, would be really interesting use of technology and like form and function effectively, right? So you're marrying those two ideas. But to go back to what you're saying, I think that a lot of the things that you can't automate those are the jobs that have like high social intelligence or social interaction, right? So you wouldn't go to a robotic therapist per se. I don't want an AI.
There are some interesting ones out there, but you're right. Not the ones that sort of take care of the nuanced stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to help me figure out, who I need to talk to. Sure, but you wouldn't want to talk to.
There isn't. I think it's a bot out there. Now I'm not going to remember the name of it, but one that sort of checks in with people every day, like, how you feeling? And like a friend, because I remember years ago, my friend that works at the Canadian Marketing Association was showing us this bot and how it was, like it did sort of pick up on some of the nuanced stuff, and he was like, I knew I was talking to a bot, but I felt like they were listening. And like the movie Her, and like that kind of, was it called Her? Yeah. So there are things out there that are getting better for mental wellness, but you're right. Like, nothing to go in and go like, listen, my wife and I are having an issue. We can't seem to communicate. No bot's going to be like, well, I can, let me figure that out for you. Yeah. We're not there yet. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, where, it's a connection point to start out with, but then, being able to really see, when do I need to talk to a human? When do I need that empathetic human response where someone else can look at me and say, I know what you're going through, or just, I know what you're experiencing. Have you thought about this? Or how can I help? That's one of those scenarios that even just talking to somebody else is so therapeutic, right?
Yeah, as Steve is saying.
And again,
there's no empathy from bots. The bot that I was talking about was called Wobot. W-O-B-O-T. And it was with Facebook. And then it's like, well, now that we know the Big Brother's watching us, I've even deleted Facebook off my phone entirely. And I'm just using it for my laptop, only because of anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down to. But like,
actually, I think that's a great segue into just using automation for good. I think we are on the cusp of using technology right now where laws and our privacy aren't keeping up with that, right? So we have technology just moving so quickly that anybody can use the data, they can sell the data, they can do whatever. So what you automate is one of those things where there's a moral aspect to what you could even automate, right?
mm-hmm.
And there's things that are grabbing data and selling it to, there was one where it was an automated toothbrush, right? And so it would sync, but it also would sell that data to insurance companies. And so then now insurance companies, they know that the mouth is the gateway to disease, and so therefore your insurance rate could just go up by $50 and a month, and you have no idea why, right? Well, it's because they bought the data from a toothbrush, and then now they're just saying, well, this is going to go up here because this person only brushes their teeth once every 6 months, and whatever. So like those sort of ideas you're absolutely right, where there's, I think, a moral obligation to building these things the right way for the right reasons, and organizations and individuals need to take that into consideration.
Yeah, and where is that data? And I think that's going to be, especially you've probably seen it as sort of like, where is technology going? It's having to have these discussions about where does the data go, and how much information. Like my students have no idea. I make them watch this. Years ago, there was a movie called Terms and Conditions May Apply. Then there's like the Social Dilemma, those kinds of movies that we are just, clicking yes without reading the terms and conditions. And I even told my students that there was something I pulled up to say that there are more words in the terms and conditions of Facebook than there is in the U.S. Constitution. So it's crazy, the data that we are giving up, and we have absolutely no idea.
But it also shouldn't take you a second level law degree to figure out what you're signing up for on an app either. So I shouldn't have a 42-page document that I need to read to install these apps. And so I think that there are there's some legislation being passed to do that. GDPR was a big step for that in Europe. I think Canada has their own as well. I know California does as well. So I think in this case, some states are moving into that, but there's a lot of sensitivity in the data that is being shared. And then I know on the GDPR side, you can take that, you can ask for your own data. So I want to see who has seen my data, who can see it, where is it, and be able to get that information. Otherwise, the company has to, and there's a time frame too. I think it's like 2 weeks. So that company then has to pay a large fine if they don't adhere to those standards, which in my mind is a positive aspect in that case. So even though I'm on the automation side, I still value data privacy personally, and I think for individuals that I'm consulting with.
Well, I definitely know you're one of the most ethical people that I've ever met in my life. You're definitely. So what are some of the misconceptions? Now Amy's joined us on the call now. Welcome, Amy. So what are some of the misconceptions people have, like people may think that you do? Because it sounds to me like, oh, well, just give the project to AJ, he'll figure it out. So what do you think are some of the misconceptions people have about what you do?
Yeah, I think you nailed on one of them from the start. It's that I'm trying to automate them out of a job. And to give an example, so my great grandmother was a switchboard operator. So like from the old movies that we click the phone, like, hello, operator, can you connect me to Leslie Hughes? And then they automatically know who you are and then know how to connect you, which is weird. But yeah, so she would actually plug in, I'm going to connect you to this switchboard, which is going to connect you to another one, et cetera. So that task obviously was automated, by computers figuring out the logic. Well, you want to get here, I can route you to this switchboard and get you to that person that you're looking for. And so, so that's one of those things that, all those people just didn't end up homeless and not working. They changed their skill set. So they did something else that was more complex now, right? And so I feel like that's where my role is. I'm not there to get rid of jobs. I'm there to take the boring stuff, the menial stuff that you deal with every day, that it's like, well, you don't have to do that. Let's figure out how we can value you and your humanity in what you're doing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's the first one. I think a lot of people think too that, oh, he's just here to, make the company money and that's it. And personally, I'm not. I like empowering people. I like saying, well, here, go back, and now you have a chance to do something completely different. And even you can grow your own skill sets in IT if you want to do that, or just even from I can take these two things that I do every day, and then you can be what's known as a citizen developer. So you can be your own sort of developer without having to know any code. You can just check boxes and move switches, and then now you're able to take the things that you would have normally taken 8 hours to do, automate them yourself, and then you don't have to have developers in there. So I think those skills are things that I'm passionate about teaching people, so that they can go in and, they're on their own. They can say, wow, I'm able to do all this cool stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that was what the part of the podcast too, that I was listening to this morning, was really about, ideally we need to be building social skills much more into curriculum, even. Universities and colleges really should be like, okay, so it's communication 101 when it comes to, so let's say computer programmers. Okay, let's learn how to talk with people, to maybe those elicitation techniques. Or if you're going into become a doctor, let's make sure that you have bedside manner. Like, let's talk, and there's a lot that, just because you become a doctor doesn't necessarily mean you have all of the tools to be able to be a compassionate doctor, or even know how to run a business from that standpoint. So there's a lot from those soft skills that are not necessarily being, and that's really where we humans come in, right? Like, to Steve's point, it's the empathy, it's the, bots don't necessarily they don't necessarily think like humans. They're getting better at it. They understand the context of language a lot better than they used to be. Insofar as you ask Siri or whatever that's the other thing. That was the other part of the podcast, was how many people went this morning and said, Siri, what's the weather going to be like today? Or we're automating these kinds of tools, but yet we're afraid of, and I've been guilty. I've been in the grocery store or wherever and purposely have gone to the teller. I don't even know what you call them anymore, but purposely have gone to the person because I'm like, I don't want them to not have a job. And why am I having to still pay the same amount of money? I don't work here. Why am I starting to have to scan stuff? So part of me is a little bit just being lazy. And the other part of me doesn't want someone to be outed for a job. At the same time, there's people that are saying, well, I'm not out of a job. Actually, they created a job because now I have to supervise all these people that are going through to use the tools. So
yeah. And you could also do things like have a concierge experience. And I feel like that's another one of those things that, for those items where people are looking for special services, or an enhanced or a white glove experience kind of a deal, where you can have that, and then that's even an added bonus into what they're doing. Right. So yeah, I definitely see those social portions of that where we're heightening that and being able to take somebody's uniqueness and add that to what they do.
Yeah. And to your point, I remember taking typing all the way through high school. Mm-hmm. My mother was adamant at me taking typing because she's like, whatever, you'll always have a skill regardless. Right. And those were the days when, for her, going through high school, she would be the secretarial pool. Yeah. Not thinking, because computers weren't even around, when I graduated high school. So yeah, go Lancers. There's the go Lancers. And so it was oh, you're going to have a skill. You're going to, be able to go off and now there's still obviously administrative professionals and EAs and those kinds of things, but the actual secretarial pool is no longer there, nor, and data processing is sort of being eliminated in a lot of organizations as well, where somebody used to sit and manually input all that stuff. That stuff is all being automated.
Right.
Yeah. So is that obviously the future is into automation and finding ways to automate a lot of these tasks, obviously. How far do you think we are in I guess that's a kind of a loaded question. Do you think it's still in the beginning stages of automation? Do you think we're still, or do you think we've actually come a long way? That's kind of a tough question.
Both. Yeah, I think we've come a long. Yeah, I think we've come a long. No, it's not a dumb question. I think we've come a long way in what we can automate, and thinking about the natural language processors that are there with some of the things we can translate automatically. So I was working on something earlier this morning where it's built into what's called omni-channel, and you can use the voice module where it has its own IVR. It listens to what I'm sure that you've called one of those where it's like, hi, how can I help you today? I would like to, here's your options. And then you say whatever the option is, it listens for that and routes you accordingly. Yeah. So then all of that natural language processing is a lot of AI, and learning the sentiment behind it is a lot of where we're going now. So I can determine if you are angry by the words that you've used or the pitch in your voice or all these different factors. And then being able to kind of suss that out from the call versus me getting your immediate vibe, let's say, and then documenting that as a call center agent. Now the computer can, or AI can go in and say, well, this person had a medium tone, and they use words that were around just unsatisfied, but not angry. Right. And so then now you can either escalate that call immediately. You can do all this logic that's there. So this is, I think, where we are. I mean, we're at there, but as we start adopting those more and more, we're going to find that now all of the technology that's there before, where it's like, press 1 for your options and listen to all the options, and doing that, we're wasting time. We have a lot of opportunity to get you to the care agent that can help you out, and then also figure out what your problem is before even determining what that is. So I can understand that by you calling in, this phone number is recognized to you. And in the last 6 months, you purchased 3 items from me. You're probably going to be calling about this one item because, maybe it's in the first 6 months we've had issues with this, or, whatever. So now I anticipate already what you're probably going to call in about. And I can even anticipate what you might want to purchase in the future. So, if it's a new coffee maker, it's like, by the way, you're about due for a new filter. Do you want me to add that to your cart today? Or I'll just send you one for free because you called in. And then now I just potentially, as an organization, created a customer for life, by sending you a free filter, And that's the kind of stuff that I think that we can get to and we're progressing into, where that's going to be the future. And then obviously, no one can predict the future of that. But, I think we've seen a lot of growth in telehealth, especially, recently. So being able to connect a doctor to somebody else. So now I don't have to waste a whole day going to the doctor, having them sit in the office, whatever. I can just get a doctor on the phone from wherever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities that are there, and a lot of skills that are going to be created from this.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as we're sort of transitioning there, it's sort of like, where do you tell the younger generation to sort of focus their attention on, which is that's a whole other discussion, I guess, in some ways, because it is interesting and exciting in some ways to think, like, when I tell my students, I'm like, most of us know who Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg is, but nobody really knows the name of Sir Tim Berners-Lee or Vincent Cerf when it comes to like where the internet came from. And I think of like Sir Tim Berners-Lee, I think he's now in charge with like this, and I don't know enough about it, is like the Web 3.0, I guess. He's the guy who created the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee. And I think, like, can you imagine just like him thinking of like he built a Frankenstein. In some ways, it has completely revolutionized the way that we communicate as human beings. In other ways, it is like the worst thing that ever happened to mankind in some ways, just like from the negative aspect of like with social media, everybody has a voice, which, that's the best thing about the internet. And the worst thing about the internet is that everybody's got a voice. So it really is interesting that this whole concept of communication is, I mean, it's always going to evolve. We can't get away from it. But do you know enough about Web 3.0, but where that's going from that standpoint?
I personally don't. No. Yeah. So I think that with any new technology that we build, we create social problems or recreate social problems, so the more that we are connected, that means that the more influence someone's voice can have over us versus, my immediate family, right? So, and friends that I might have. So now, because I'm connected to somebody that I was, I lived nearby, went to the same high school as 20 years ago, their voice still pops into my head when I go do something, right? So that's one of those things that is the pervasive nature of just growth and progression in my mind, is that we end up creating new social problems that didn't exist before. But how we adapt to that, how fast we adhere to our own morality and our own kind of set of guidelines is, I think, the growth opportunity as humans and just humanity in general.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's so many questions I have here, and we haven't even like gotten to the top of the list, and we've gone on so many different tangents
I
that
know.
But I mean, I just want to make sure that people know. So, what kind of clients are you working with? Like, so I just really want to get an idea of like the scope of like who are some of the clients that you work with? Like, you don't have to name names, but generalities of.
Yeah, so it's really anybody from, small medium businesses, if you've got some things that, and you are using the Microsoft platform. So again, I mentioned the Microsoft 365 Power Platform, Dynamics space. So that's my wheelhouse. And so it can be small. I need you to do this automation, or it can be large enterprise organizations like help us plan it, help us figure this out, and we can work with other partners to implement that, or we have people on our own side that can do some of this stuff too. So it's really all together there. I think on the enterprise side, you would want a team of people behind you. I've got collaborators that work with me, but at this point, I'm doing the majority of those efforts. And so yeah, but it's small, medium-sized companies. If you've got, those automation, I wish we could do this cool thing. I wish that we had, a team of people that we could grow up in this space or this skill set. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody.
Cool. Okay, and I know there's one more question. So before that happens, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so feel free to go to my website. It's betransparent.com. It's also at betransparent on Twitter. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I'm available.
Well, the other thing that I want to talk to you now, because we have a few more minutes, is your passion. One of the things that you do for your passion, which is helping African American. So tell me a little bit about that's called Power Platform. That's what you've mentioned to me. So tell me more about that, because
Sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to be one of the co-organizers of the Power Platform School. And so there's a woman named Tricia Sinclair in the UK, and this was kind of her brainchild. And I got connected to her through a friend of mine to initially do some web work for them and just help them out there. And then became a co-organizer to help really launch what they're going with, and like the students, and basically taking students of color, African Americans, Black folks, and then also having representation in IT. So adding, I think in the UK, there's 4% representation of Black folks or the BAME community in IT. And so we are helping students learn the Power Platform School so that they can then become consultants and or CRM administrators or, IT professionals in that space. So yeah, we had our kickoff in February, and we started our third session this week. So I delivered a session on, it's called Canvas app, so building an app from scratch. And I got to see a collection of just awesome people build their own apps for the first time. And it was an ordering app for how to order software devices or hardware devices. And so you could go in and, if you're in an internal company, I need to have a new laptop. I need to have this laptop with this specs, whatever. They were able to create that in a day. And it was really cool to see, starting out, they had no idea what that was. And then at the end of the day, they ended up building their own app, and it was great.
That is amazing. And I know it's a whole series of training, because I know you've got people doing resumes. I'm going to step in and do some LinkedIn, or actually networking stuff. I can't remember. I think it's called networking, but I'm probably, I'm going to go off on the whole LinkedIn and why that's important and all that other stuff too. So there's quite a series of, and so where can people find out more information about that? And is it just the US, or is it UK? Because if you say the ladies in UK, who can take this?
Yeah. So right now it's an 8-week course. It's in the UK and the US. And I don't believe we reached out to Canada yet, but I think that's on our targeted list. We're looking to expand it into different areas. But yeah, so 8-week course on the entire Power Platform. So you can learn Power Apps, Power BI, all of the different tools. And then on top of that, you're right. So there are some, we'll say, soft skills or social skills sessions as well that are non-technical, that allow our mentees to come in, learn about building the right resume, building, your own brand, and then being able to successfully interview in the IT space.
Is it an application process at the
Yeah, so you can go on powerplatformschool.com and submit your own application to enroll in the class. And then, or if you want to be an instructor and you have those skills, that's fine. We're also looking for mentors. So however you want to get connected, we can fit you in. So
I know it's a big passion of yours, so I wanted to definitely talk about it. And I'm looking forward to the next steps, because I haven't been involved yet, but I'm really excited to step in and help in any way that I can.
Actually working on your stuff yesterday. So yeah, so I've got a whole slide deck ready for you to get going, and then you can fill in all the other stuff that you need to in the meet there. So you'll have your own template and be ready to go.
Well, I like to talk, so I mean, I will have no problem with that at all. So people can reach you at betransparent.com. There's the Power Platform School. Any last words, any kind of like mantra, belief, motivational phrases, or anything that you want to leave people with at all?
Yeah, I think just be curious. I think curiosity is a good thing. You're never bored if you're curious. I think apathy is the opposite of curiosity, and maintain that curiosity.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, even though we went off in all these different tangents, but I always learned something from you no matter what. You challenge my status quo, that's for sure. And definitely, well, why, Leslie? Why are you doing it that way? Why? So that's definitely a good question to ask.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun, and I can't believe an hour went by that quickly.
Well, yeah, like anytime you and I talk, it's like, where does the time go? Anyway. All right. Well, thanks again, AJ. And thank you to all you guys who joined up, Amy and Steven, all our chuckle friends. Thank you for joining us today. And I guess I'll just talk to you later. Bye, AJ.
Thanks.
Bye.